Hey guys, Matthew. In today's video, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make any 12-link weapons. So when I say 12-link, of course, I'm talking about weapons which utilizes the squire in order to get many links, such as, for example, this wand here, right, which is a 12-link wand, or, for example, this Imperial Claw. Now, the reason we call them 12 links is because every single one of these modifiers are essentially as strong as an actual link. So you would get the 3 link from the actual links, you would get 6 affixes, which all count as links, and then 3 links on a squire for a total of 12. That's kind of why we call these 12 links. But this video is going to teach you guys how to make pretty much any single 12 link item utilizing recombinators to the fullest extent, and of course also in some cases not being able to utilize recombinators. Now in my example, I'm going to be utilizing the 12 link wand, which is our perfect wand in this league. It's absolutely crazy. There's only a single other one like this, fully T1, and it's in standard, so super happy with this craft here. But again, it can be applied to basically any 12 link, and not just that, also just any item, especially the start of the video. I'm going to be talking about laddering up your affixes, but of course, yeah, this is not just for these weapons. You could do that with elemental weapons, physical weapons, body armors. It really doesn't matter what it is. This is just going to be a basic guide, if you will, to laddering up with recombinators. And of course, afterwards, we're going to look at what's specific to these 12 link weapons and how to best do them. So let's get right into it. It all starts with, of course, as always, the complete guide to recombinators by my good friend Iron, and we are going to be looking at this right here, which is essentially the mod distribution and whatnot of modifiers in a pool whenever it comes to the recombinating of affixes. Right, so the wand is actually an interesting one because you can take advantage of the mod pool as the suffixes, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video. We're actually going to start off by talking about the prefixes. So the first thing is, how do we get the prefixes? Now, in previous leagues, the way that we would have done the prefixes, because they are all shaper modifiers, without recombinators, it would have been incredibly annoying and difficult. We would have had to basically alteration spam for one of the rarest modifiers, which in this case is by far lightning damage with this weapon per 10 intelligence. And then after that, we would have Reforge attack until we got either T1 lead or 40% more. And then once we got that with an open prefix, we would have made sure that our suffixes were full, and then we would augmented influence in order to get the final prefix, which in our case, the best case scenario would be to alt spam for lightning. Craft prefixes cannot be changed, Reforge attack until we get the 40% more, and then augment for wed, because wed has 2 tiers and it's more common than 40% more. So that's kind of the way that we would have done the prefixes. But due to recombinators, there is a much easier way to do so. So let's talk about that. And this all starts with the idea of laddering up. So the way that we ladder up essentially is by utilizing this table here of mod redistribution. The best way to get one modifier to go to another item with another modifier, right, is to essentially have 2 items which each have 1 modifier, which is either a prefix or a suffix, and it has to do the same because prefixes and suffixes are treated independently, and then have 1 modifier which is crafted, which is both the same. Now looking at the table, this puts us in the 4 mod pool. It gives us a 35% chance to get 3 mods, which is basically a success. And then in the 55% chance to get 2 mods, there's essentially 3 possibilities when it comes to 2 mods. Either you get the good mod with a crafted mod, the other good mod with a crafted mod, or 2 good mods together. The 2 crafted mods cannot be together because they're the same. In this regards, we end up with having another 1 out of 3 chance of 50% on top, or sorry, 1 out of 3 chance of 55% on top of our 35 to actually have a success. So this is pretty cheap because all it's going to cost you is essentially the base, which in this case would be a Shaper Elder imbued wand, which you can make with basically an Awakener's Orb, right? And maybe a 10 Chaos wand. So it's probably like less than 2 Exalt per attempt or something, or per base, and then you would alt spam for the modifier. Now, some of them are quite rare, like this modifier here is like 600 or 700 alterations. It's pretty annoying, but this one right here is really common, and so is the elemental damage with attack seals. So what we're going to do once we have these 2 modifiers is, again, craft a prefix, which is going to be the same on both, and no other affixes. We do not want any other prefixes on there. Of course, suffixes don't matter. So what I'll do here is I'll export this, and by exporting that, I'll be able to recombinate using the actual emulator. So we're going to recombinate, and unfortunately this time nothing happens, so we're going to recombinate again. And remember, we have about a 35% chance of ending up with all our 3 affixes, or 55%, and a 1 and 3 to end up with both affixes. So in this case, it looks like we also did not hit anything great. So let's go ahead and do it again one more time. And there we have it. 1 and 3, 35%, as I was saying. So the Recombinator is, the Recombinator on Craft of Exile is pretty accurate when it comes to the odds. Now, once you get to the point where you have your Lightning and your 40% more, you essentially laddered up from 1 mod to 2 mod on one singular item. The way that you get to 3 mods is to basically do the same thing with the other modifiers that you want on another item, and then you're going to try to ladder those 2 up. So let's just say that we were to say that we laddered up from 1 mod to 2 mod for the 40% and the WED, and then on another base we got the Lightning and the 40%, right? So these are the 2 bases that we have with 4 modifiers, or 2 modifiers each. Looking at the 4 mods in the pool, we're actually going to be utilizing the exact same odds. 35% chance to succeed. Unfortunately, though, if we get the 2 mods, we're basically going to recycle 2 of the modifiers that we get, right, or that we already have, which means essentially we're losing one of our bases for free, and there's only a 10% chance that we get a complete brick where we even have to remake our initial base. So this is our best odds. Now, you could say you have 5 mods in the pool or even 6 mods in the pool where you would craft a modifier on both, but the issue there is that by crafting a modifier on both, instead of having only the good mods, you also have 2 other mods, and even if you pair them together, in the 70% chance to get 3 mods, it only takes 1 of those crafted modifiers to come brick everything, and they can pair up with 4 different affixes. So overall, your odds are worse than if you were to just leave them, I guess you could say, blank with no crafted prefixes. So let's go ahead and do that. And again, it's about a 35% chance. So we're going to go ahead and take that, and then we're going to Recombinator it, and it should take on average about 3 tries to get it done. So unfortunately, didn't happen this time around. Let's go again. Boom, boom. Didn't happen this time around, and didn't happen this time around either. Okay, neither this time. All right, so this would be pretty unfortunate. Oh, wait, I think I have the wrong modifier. That's why. Okay, it's actually not that it's not working. It's that I have the wrong modifier. So I actually have the more spell instead of the more attack, which makes sense as to why this is not working out in the 1 to 3. So we have the WED, the 40%, and then here with the Lightning and the 40%. All right, this is going to be a lot better now. And again, should be a 1 and 3 on the Recombinator. So let's go ahead and do that. And we didn't hit it on the first try. See if we hit it on the second. And there it is, right? 1 and 3. It took us 2 attempts. And now we are essentially done with our prefixes. Now, the cool thing is that this works with literally any item in the game. You're talking about, triple T1 physical prefixes on a weapon. Talking about triple T1 elemental prefixes. Talking about, 12 links. Talking about body armors. It doesn't matter what it is. This is always going to stay the same. Now we're going to look into specifically how to craft a 12-link wand and also a 12-link claw, because they're a little bit different due to their mod pool as suffixes. So essentially, we're going to start by looking at the wand, and then we're going to look at the claw a little bit later on. Okay. So looking at the wand, the first thing that we have to do once we get to this point where we actually have all our 3 prefixes done is look at which suffixes we actually want, and there's no real choices here. Some people will say that you can choose between this and that. No, strictly no. There are some suffixes that are just outright better than everything else, and that's the ones that we're going to want to go for because, of course, we're talking about a mirror tier item. So the first thing is faster attacks. Now, this is what's actually going to affect the local attack speed of your weapon. And if you don't have that, I'm sorry to say your wand is trash. Like, it really is. Even if it was T2, that would still be much, much better than not having it. Because realistically speaking, otherwise you were just going to have the basic attack speed of 1.5, which is just really bad because all of your scaling on your entire build is scaling off of your baseline attack speed on the wand. So we really, really want T1 faster attacks. Sorry. So the way that we're going to do that is to reforge speed. Now here's the problem. When it comes to speed on a wand, there's a lot of modifiers. There's cast speed, there's prod speed, there's regular attack speed, there's faster attacks, there's faster casting. There's also the onslaught, and there's even spell echo. That's a lot of actual speed modifiers. On average, to get T1 faster attacks on a wand with these suffixes is something like 25 attempts. And that is only due to the fact that it has a weighting of 1,000 compared to, say, T1 attack speed, which only has a weighting of 500. So at least the weighting is pretty strong. But that's about 25 reforges of 2 exalt every time. And when you fill up your prefixes, you have to do, or your suffixes, you have to do reforge scheme and prefixes. So call it about 60x in order to get that done. So let's just go ahead and do a few and see what happens. So we're going to bench craft. So crafted, and then we're going to craft on prefixes cannot be changed. Prefixes cannot be changed. And once we have that done, we are going to reforge speed using harvest. And again, it's going to take, on average, roughly 25 to get the T1 faster attacks. Now, once we do get the T1 faster attacks, which it only took about 5 attempts in our case here, we need to look at what do we want next. Because the T1 faster attacks is by far the most important part. Well, the next thing that we want is increased critical strikes and increased critical damage. And this is going to be the same thing for most 12-link weapons. You know, some sort of attack modifier, some sort of speed modifier, and then, you know, crit and crits. The cool thing when it comes to wands, and this is why I'm saying wands and claws are a little bit different, is that while it's a lot more expensive to get faster attacks T1 than it is on a, it is a lot more expensive on a wand than it is on a claw because of all the other affixes which also have a speed tag. The wand has a very nice bonus that when it comes to attack tags on the influences, there's like none. There's essentially only faster attacks, which we would already have, which also blocks out onslaught. And all that remains is increased crit strikes and also increased crit multi, which essentially means that if we were to roll, if we were to augment influence on our wand and we hit anything that is not what we want, it is guaranteed to not have an attack tag, which essentially means that we can target a null every single augment, which means once we have this T1 attack speed the first time, we never have to get it back until we get to the final aug, whether we miss it or actually hit it. And of course, the claw follows. The claw does not follow the same logic, which I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So what we would do once we have the faster attacks is we would actually craft Cannot Roll Caster. Now there's no reason to craft any other block. Cannot Roll Caster is going to block Spell Echo, and it's also going to block faster casting, which have decent weighting, about 3,000. So this is going to make it slightly easier. So we're going to go ahead and bench craft the suffix Cannot Roll Caster modifier, and then we are going to augment influence. Now, as you can see, every single augment that I do, none of them have an attack tag. The only possible one which has an attack tag is going to be one that I actually care for, which is going to be either in crit or in crit. Every single other one, like say for example, increase AoE, I can just craft on Cannot Roll attack mods and just annul it. And there you go. You'll see that it's a guaranteed annul every single time because it doesn't have an attack tag, which means that, again, it's a lot of currency that you save on the faster attacks. Now, eventually, let's go back to Cannot Roll Caster and augment influence. Eventually, you're going to actually hit either the increased crit strikes or the increased crit damage. So in this case, we hit the increased crit strikes. Now, we need to be careful because the increased crit strikes has two different variants which are in the same mod pool. One for attacks with the local crit chance, and the other one is for spells with the crit chance to spells. So it's actually very important that you pay attention to that because you could also get T1 incrit with spell crit. And then when you aug, let's say you get multi, you're like, oh my god, I hit it, right? I have a perfect weapon. But in reality, you have the wrong crit, which means that the base crit of the weapon is not affected, right? Instead of having like 5 point or 8 point whatever, or even up to 9, you'll only have like 7.5, which is not the worst thing ever, but it's definitely not great. So you definitely want to have the incrit with the local crit chance. Now comes the actual hard part, the actual annoying part. You have the yellow aug-inf. There's no blocks, nothing you can do. All you do is augment influence. That's it. If you don't hit the final incrit, you're boned, right? You essentially fail. Now, there's a couple of things that you could accept in some cases that might actually be considered mirror tier by some people, depending on their builds. Now, it's very important that you use faster attacks, and it's very important that you have the incrits with the actual local critical strike chance, not just spells. However, the final augment, there's a few things that you could hit that wouldn't be that bad. Obviously, the crit multi would be the absolute best, but let's just say that you hit, and there's not very many, but let's just say that you hit lesser multiple projectiles. That could be okay, because it means that if they're using greater multiple projectiles, this has a smaller multiplier. They'll lose out on some proj, but it's definitely usable. And another thing that you could hit would be, I mean, damage for power charge could work, because a lot of these builds that use those have, you know, quite a few. But again, it's not ideal at all. And then the other one, I believe, is volley, right? If you hit volley, it's kind of like the equivalent of that lesser multiple projectile. So it's not the worst, but again, it's absolutely not the best. And if you want something that looks like this, you really just got to go for these suffixes, because that's the absolute best in slot. That's pretty much it for the wand. Now let's look at a claw, because a claw is a little bit different due to the actual mod pool. Now, when it comes to the wand, you only have to do the faster attacks a single time, all the way up until the final aug, and if you miss the final aug, you have to reforge keeping prefixes, go back to speed, reforges up to about 60x, and then do the augment until you get the fifth modifier that's good, incrit or incrit, and then augment for the last one. The claw is a little bit different and also a little bit more annoying, but there's also a bit of a secret method of actually crafting it, which a lot of people don't seem to know about, which is probably why we were able to make it so much quicker than most groups this league. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys about that, and let's get to it. So we're going to look at a claw, Imperial Claw, and it's going to be Shaper and Elder. And the idea here is that we're going to do the prefixes the exact same way than we did the prefixes on the other one. We're going to ladder up. Now, the advantage of the claw, however, is that the claw has an Elder prefix and 2 Shaper prefixes. It doesn't have 3 Shaper prefixes, so you don't have to ladder up from nothing. You can actually ladder up from 2 modifiers because you can Awakener's Orb. So you can Awakener's Orb the Ruthless and the Socketed More, and then you can Awakener's Orb the Ruthless and the Wed, and as long as you have an open prefix, it's the equivalent of if you had laddered up from the start. There's also a really cool thing, which I think a lot of people did not catch on, and this is something that you can realize if you look at the item level of our claw. Our claw is item level 79. Most other claws that you'll see are going to be item level 86 or whatever, because they were made with Recombinators. But there's a bit of a trick here. When it comes to claws, and this is not applicable to wands, when it comes to the actual claw, you can see that there's a lot of modifiers that if you were below level 80, you would not be able to get. But the modifiers that you actually care for are all, except for 1, or 2, below level 80. So there's Ruthless. Ruthless is 83. Or sorry, Ruthless is 80, right? So that you can get at level 80. There is, like 80 and above, if you will. Then there is the Wed, which is 75, and then there's also the more attack damage, which is 83. Now looking at our suffixes, however, we have the Multi-Strike, which is 75, right here. And then we also have Crit Multi, which is 75, and then we also have Crit Chance, which is 75. Which means if you can somehow make your claw lower than level 80, you will block out a lot of mods. You'll block out the Melee Splash, you'll block out the Onslaught, you'll block out the Ancestral, you'll block out the Unholy Might, the Blind. There's a lot of things you can block, which is going to make it a lot easier to hit your suffixes. Matter of fact, it makes it significantly easier. I believe you go from a 1 in 18 on the last augment to a 1 in 13 or something like that. Like, it's pretty significant considering how much investment you need to put into the item in order to get to that level. So let's go ahead and put item level 79, and then we'll talk about how we actually got item level 79 on a double influence with 2 prefixes. 2 prefixes that were below item level 80, right? Or higher than item level 80, because Socketed Skills is item level 83 and Ruthless is item level 80. So how did we actually go about doing that? Well, what we did is we got an item level 75 Imperial Claw, and then we alterations with Elder and Shaper, of course. And then we alteration spammed for the Wed, because the Wed is the only modifier that can actually work on this. Then what we did is we Awakener Orb that with a Ruthless Claw, because the Awakener's Orb is going to bypass item level requirements, which gave us a Ruthless and Wed Claw. Now, as long as we had an open prefix, we then got another Claw, which was item level 75, and we got a Claw, which was item level 83 for the Socketed Skills, and those were both Shaper and Elder, and we alteration spam 1 for Wed and 1 for Socketed More attacks, and then we recombinated those together until we had attack and Wed. And the way that it works is that it takes the average of both claws and then it adds 2. So if we look at 75 plus 83, right, divided by 2 is 79. All right, so that's essentially how we went that's essentially how we went about getting the 80% more, the Ruthless, and the Wed on an item level 79, because then what we did is that we recombinated a 79 claw, or sorry, an 81 claw, right? Because essentially it's 79 plus 2, it's the average plus 2, and with our 75 claw, which was from the Awakener's Orb, because that bypasses item level, so we had a 75 Wed plus Ruthless, and then an 81 attack plus Ruthless, which gave us an 81 plus a 75, right, divided by 2, which gives us 78. and then I guess it added 2, but for some reason, or maybe I messed up my math here, but anyways, it gave us an item level 79, which allowed us to block a bunch of bad suffixes, which I think a lot of people forgot to think about when they were thinking about how they were going to make this, and I think that helped us a lot in terms of being able to finish it, because you have to redo the suffixes much less often than if we weren't, than if we had an item level 80, and of course doing the suffixes is the expensive part. So that's kind of how we actually cheesed our way to a sub-item level 80 claw with all 3 prefixes. So that was some very 5-head crafting, if I do say so myself. Now the next thing is a mistake that I see people make all the time, is that they reforge crits, because there's both crit chance and crit multi. That is not the way to go at all when it comes to crafting these. The way that you want to do this is you want to actually craft reforge speed until you get the T1 multi-strike, because again, the multi-strike is by far the most important modifier. If you're T1, if you have T2 crit multi and T2 crit strikes, it doesn't matter that much. What's really important is if you have the T1 multi, because that's by far the best modifier. And that mod alone, if it was T2, adds or removes significantly more damage than if you had a T2 crit damage or T2 crit strikes. Now I'm going to go into a bit of a secret crafting, or a bit of a, cheesy way of crafting this, which a lot of people are also probably not thinking about, which is what allowed us to, again, make this item so much faster than most people. And that is actually not auging influence, right? Normally, if we look at the wand, we have to reforge until we get the faster attacks, and then we augment influence until we actually get what we want. But I did the math on this, and with an item level 79 claw, so let me go ahead and create a new item, which is going to be a claw, which is going to be item level 79, very important. Item level 79, 30 quality, Shaper Elder. Right, now what we're going to do is we are going to add whatever prefixes. It doesn't particularly matter, so we're just going to put this. I'm pretty sure this won't let me bypass the item level requirements for the right modifier, so we're just going to put Ruthless. Yeah, see, it's not going to let me actually do what we actually had, so I'm just going to add cold damage as a placeholder for my prefixes. But yeah, what we do is we reforge speed until we get the T1 multi. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that on there, because this is item level 75, which means it can roll here. Now, what most people would do is that they would augment influence, right? Maybe you craft on a block, except you realize that there's nothing you can actually block when it comes to augmenting influence on this claw. But here's how you actually make this claw. What you're going to do is you are going to get your T1 multi-strike, and then you are actually going to craft on a suffix, which is going to be dexterity and accuracy. So let's go ahead and do that. Go to the crafting of the bench, which is dexterity and accuracy. It's a hybrid modifier from an unveil. So let's see, it's here. Strength, dex, and accuracy. By crafting strength, dex, and accuracy, you are actually going to block out the dexterity, which is one of the highest mod in the pool, and you're also going to remove accuracy from the pool, which is also a pretty high weighted modifier. But not only that, it has an attack tag, which you're going to be blocking 2 of the highest weightings in the entire pool and removing an attack tag. Now what you're going to do, which is really, really 5-head, is that you're actually going to craft, you're actually going to X-Slam. By slamming an Exalt, most of the time you're going to end up with a modifier which does not have an attack tag. So you'll simply able to craft on the suffix, cannot roll attack mods, right? And by crafting that, you'll be able to annul the mana every single time. Right, so that's how we're going to do that. It's very important that you have the block of dexterity and accuracy, though. And that's how I was able to make this claw so much sooner than most people, I believe. So let's go ahead and remove that. And then, again, I crafted this, and then I X-slammed. So most of the time, I ended up with a modifier which did not have an attack tag. As you can see, no attack tag. This one actually has an attack tag. Now, if you do end up with a modifier with an attack tag, you need to craft on prefixes cannot be changed, and then you need to annul. And it's a, 50-50 whether you hit, this one or that one. Of course, it can also hit the prefixes cannot be changed. In this case, I saved it. If I kill it, I need to go back to Reforge Speed. Now, the advantage of Reforge Speed on this compared to the wand is that the wand was like 60x on average, right, to get the T1 faster attacks, but we could save it every time. In this case, with the Exalt slamming method, we're actually going to have to annul quite a bit, and we're going to have to kill this multi-strike quite a bit in order to get our 5th modifier, but it's only a 1 in 11 attack Reforges to actually get T1 multi-strike, which means 22x on average, plus of course if you fill up the suffixes, whatever, call it 25x to get this modifier, and then you go into the Exalt slamming. Now when we go into the Exalt slamming, so long as we have the right block, eventually, when we slam and we keep removing the non-attack tag, right, eventually we are going to Exalt Slam, either increase crit strikes and increase crit damage. And the advantage of a claw is that it doesn't have the bad crit strikes like a wand does. There's no such thing as that. So eventually you're going to end up with increased crit strengths. And then, just like the wand, you have to go for the YOLO at the end, where you are basically going to augment influence. And of course, if you miss, well, you've got to Reforge keeping prefixes and go through the whole process again. So that's pretty much how that works, right? And it'll take on average 13 of the final augment influence to get the last remaining crit strikes of either T1 or T2, and 1 in 26 in order to get T1, which is why this one is so incredible, because it has all T1 suffixes, which was a 1 in 26 chance to actually hit the right one at tier 1, which is absolutely insane, especially considering it cost me less than a mirror to craft this item, because I got insanely lucky on the suffixes. This one, however, costs us 10 mirrors, and there's a T2, so, you know, I guess sometimes lucky, sometimes unlucky. But that is essentially how you can craft any 12-link weapons, be it the 12-link the 12-link swords for flicker or the 12-link BV wands. The only difference on the BV wands is that you would start with the suffixes, and then you would do the prefixes, kind of like how I just explained. Of course, you'd have to make sure that you are paying attention to the mod pools and tiers and all that. But the good thing about the BV one is actually the suffixes are extremely easy to make. It's literally just an Awakener's Orb into a Reforged crit. To actually get the perfect suffixes, you get AoE crit, and then you Reforge into crit, and the only thing you give you is crit damage, or crit multi. And of course, if you miss, then you just basically imprint back in Awakener's Orb again, and then you can do that twice without using any recombinators for the suffixes. That's the actual right way to do it, to get the perfect suffixes, which is AoE, incrit strikes, and incrit damage, and of course incrit strikes to spells in this case. And then once you have that, you do that twice, and then you get one with Cold Pen, and then another with 40% more spell damage. You craft on a prefix on both, which is matching, and then you have about a 35% chance to basically have a fully done, weapon, which is better than even the one that is currently crafted with damage per charge, as long as you care more about the AoE. So it's a super, super easy craft. But anyways, that'll be it for this 12-link crafting video. Hopefully this was informative. I know that there's a lot of leaks in this video, a lot of little tricks that most people don't know about to help you essentially make those items much easier and much quicker. Now, another advantage of doing the Exalt slamming on the claw is that, well, you don't have to go to TFT to augment influence. You can just kind of keep slamming Exalts and then, reforging speed. And the only thing you ever have to take care of when it comes to augmenting influence is the final modifier, which is really, really nice because it's not necessarily just the price, but it's also the availability, which is kind of bad. But anyways, before I go, I do want to say a massive thank you to my supporters. So Jaden and Rocky, Max, Solomonk, Exo, Miss, Rescoro, Thomas, Mas, Nate, The Great Master, Alex, Tim, Mercury, Bert, Kai, Nailed, Jarvis, Jovent, Bitizen, Vaith, Talismar, Endo, Drago99, and Sins Eater. Thank you guys very, very much for your support. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you guys enjoy the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.